Hey guys, Amazing Ampharos here, picking back up with my Final Fantasy IV The After Years playthrough. And I'm gonna apologize in advance for this segment. This is Edward's tale. You might remember Edward from the original Final Fantasy IV as everyone's not-so-favorite spoony bard. All of his stats were bad, and he had no clear useful role in combat. Now, he is a lot better in this game than he used to be, but as a practical matter, he's still not very good, and more importantly, his tale is designed around the assumption that he can't fight at all, so there's actually no required fighting in this tale at all. In other words, this is going to take me under an hour, but somewhat close to it, and I will have no real gameplay the entire time. If you want to tune out right now, I understand. Skip forward to Lunarian's tale. That one's a lot more fun. However, this one does hit up quite a few important storyline points. Because even though Edward is a spoony bard, an ineffective ruler, and a terrible combatant, he actually has a pretty big impact on the politics of their world. And we're starting off by getting an introduction to the dynamics of Domsian politics, which is basically that Edward's secretary Harley believes herself to be very important, and everyone seems to agree with her. Apparently, it's a good financial strategy for your kingdom to finance all the other kingdoms, which is probably too expensive, but Edward knows he can just trust his secretary to handle it. Well, good luck, Edward. And thankfully, this is pretty much the last we have to deal with that problem. Now let's deal with the problem we actually will be worrying about for this entire panel, which is that nasty meteor we just saw fall. A meteor fell in the vicinity of Kabul, and of course, if you recall the geography of this world, Kabul and Domsian are adjacent countries, so it affects our territory too. Edward's decisive plan for leadership is to immediately consult Cecil, who is a more powerful ruler who runs a more powerful kingdom. Harley wants to go, Edward's unsure, but Harley gets her way. Edward wants to come with her, Harley doesn't want Edward to come, Edward doesn't come. This is the kind of firm leadership you can expect from Edward throughout this tale. Edward's worried about Harley. The Chancellor says he should get some sleep. So, unlike in every other game I've played, the correct answer is to go get some sleep. Way to go, Edward. Fortunately, we're not the only ones who think that Edward's decision to go to sleep was a really wimpy one. His long-dead fiancée seems pretty unimpressed with him. She doesn't have a whole lot to say, probably on account of being dead. But she's going to convince us to go out and do something. And that something starts with looting our own castle, of course. There's not really a lot to get here, but a couple of the things are pretty deviously hidden. Like this bomb core here. And I also grabbed that bronze tail, not because it's going to be important, but because I want to talk a little bit about it. Bronze tails are an item that, if you get a large supply of them, you can eventually later on get a gold tail. Now, the problem is that throughout the story, you find enough bronze tails and silver tails to get 4/5 of the way to a gold tail. The rest you have to get from monster drops. Edward's party is horrible, and has almost no ability to actually fight. I'm not going to be fighting, especially because at endgame the item the gold tail gets you isn't even very good. So that bronze tail is the only one I'm going to get. I just wanted to show that that mechanic is in this tail, so then you'll know it's there when I ignore it later. And here we lie to our Chancellor about our plans to go on a walk as opposed to go look for Harley. But I wasn't done looting, so let's finish that first. The only really useful item out of all that was that silver armlet, but we take what we can get. And we're back to the same nasty place that we were at with Yang's group, except we're of course approaching it from the other side. And since we're Team Edward instead of Team Yang, the enemies are a lot weaker. And you probably noticed I got a longsword, which is actually a substantial attack upgrade for one of the guards if I want to use it. But I really don't, because I have nothing to gain. I'm never going to attack for this entire tail. So why waste the menu time equipping a better weapon? On the other hand, this is worth it. If I recall, you can see the guards don't all have the same stats. And guard B is actually a lot better than the other two guards. I know, strange how that works out. So I give him the iron armor since if some of the guards go down, it doesn't really affect anything. But guard B is holistically the one who most improves my survival chances. Though my odds of wiping are extremely low either way. The beret, on the other hand, is a pretty good piece of armor for Edward. And the way this tale plays out, improving Edward's armor is really the only meaningful equipment changing he did. You'll see why that is as we get a little deeper. And another thing you can do with Edward, which is actually pretty fast, you can always throw a bard song on your party before the start of battle. Bard song can always target either your party or the enemy's party. Targeting your party is honestly just the correct decision virtually 100% of the time. You target the enemy's party, you get these really unreliable status effects that are really random. Your own party, you either get really small amounts of healing to a random degree that in any one battle don't help you much but really add up, or you get that Guardian's Ballad you saw, which is Protect and Shell on all characters. Or even better, you get Haste March, which is haste on the whole party. Now, when I'm just running from everything, Haste March like this actually doesn't help me at all. But if I were actually fighting, haste march is one of the prime arguments for why I might want to use Edward. So that's kind of a tragedy, really. If you actually look at Edward's other commands, he got several other buffs from the last game. Instead of having that really worthless ability where he split a potion 5 ways, so it healed no one by any useful amount, he now has a solve ability, which allows him to use any consumable item on as many party members as you have. You'll use that many instances of the item. For instance, if you use a potion with 5 party members, you'll use 5 potions. But everyone will be healed at once with the full effects of a potion. Now, Harley here comes with an initial piece of equipment that doubles the effects of used items. So, if you stack these two things, you can actually get some really ridiculous healing with potions. And more importantly, you can use this for other kinds of items too, like Phoenix Downs. So Edward is actually the only character who can revive multiple characters at once. His hide command is by far the most reliable way to survive devastating target all attacks as well. So Edward has a lot of niche strategic use that you're probably not going to see at all in this run, but I figured it was my duty to make you aware of. Now Harley, on the other hand, who's just joined our party, is, in my opinion, the single worst playable character in this game. All of her stats are bad, and she really has no useful way to contribute to anything. We do have that band, which is a good healing band, that I'm not going to use again because it takes too much time. I was just showing it was there. Her 2 command abilities are Piercing Sight, which is the same thing as Sitter Luca's Analyze, which is the same thing as the Spell Libra, which has extremely little tactical utility, and Guild Toss, which throws some amount of money based on your level to do damage to the enemy. Now look, Harley starts at level 5. You'll throw a very small amount of money to do a similarly small amount of damage. If you gain a lot of levels, you could throw a large amount of money to do a somewhat okay amount of damage to bankrupt yourself. So with the amount of experience you needed in order to get to the high level in the first place, you've also gotten even higher damage potential with other characters. This of course presumes that slow and fragile Harley even survives to get her turn. It's entirely likely that Harley will not survive or trip out of this freighter, and honestly it makes no difference to me if she does. Truly horrible character. Though I do kind of have a sense of what they were thinking. I said all of her stats are bad, but that's not strictly accurate. Actually, her intelligence stat is very high, which, if you're familiar with the game mechanics, intelligence is what powers up offensive magic. Now, Harley doesn't learn offensive magic, so her intelligence stat actually does nothing. But if you actually hack the game, you'll discover a dummied out command that no character gets called Blue Magic. Those who played other Final Fantasies remember that's monster magic, which could be very useful, and if you tried to chart out which character it probably went to, it probably went to Harley. Now, I don't know why they ultimately didn't implement it. The hacking shows it was pretty rough and not really functional, so maybe they just ran out of time and decided to scrap something that wasn't working anyway. Either way, it's really Harley's loss, because as she stands now, she has literally no possible utility. Even guards A, B, and C are a lot better because they honestly have better stats, and they live longer just to throw random items if you were actually going to fight them. And it's also possible Edward could die in here too. Though unlike with Harley, I would actually really prefer Edward live. Luckily, right before you get out, you get a full heal, which will heal everyone important and revive Harley. so we can be in full status for our trip back to Dobson. But it looks like our messenger's back, so let's go find out about that. And I've been having really peculiar luck getting Guardian's Ballot and Mace cards over and over again. If I were actually fighting, this would be fantastic luck. But I have to tell you, it is unusual. The most common effect of Bard Song is the really low-ranking healing stuff. And you've probably also seen the no effect come up. That's pretty crummy, but that kind of possibility is just part of the life of Edward. Speaking of things being ineffectual, let's jump into these cutscenes and see a little bit of Edward's rule in action. Well, the emissary from Baron's not very talkative, and he's the one directing the conversation instead of Edward. He pretty much just told Edward how it's going to be. Edward doesn't like it, but in the end, Edward's not going to get anything out of this conversation, as the emissary got his tour of the castle, tells Edward to sit down and not make trouble, and leaves. Edward decides he's going to go to Baron to sort this out. He doesn't want to bring guards. The Chancellor really wants him to bring guards, so he's going to bring guards. Now, shall we go? Speaking of Edward's firm rule, Edward declares that Harley's not coming. Harley says she is coming. Edward just knows it's a bad idea. He's right, but she's a secretary, which is apparently important. So she says she's going, and I'll spoil it, she's going. She promises not to burden us too much. She's lying, but oh well, here we go. And I just realized that I completely forgot to buy tents. It doesn't really matter since I can buy the blighter and typo. But this makes things just a little bit interesting. I used the tent there, so I'm at full health for this legitimately dangerous dungeon. And just as importantly, I want to keep the lunar phase cycling properly. I'm on waxing moon now. I'll have to do something much more dangerous later, for which I'm going to run Volver. So I'm basically just putting myself in a position to get that lunar cycle later. And here we are in the Kaipo waterways. this exciting dungeon is pretty much the center point of Edward's tale. Because we're going to be going through here several times. After all, when you're playing with really underpowered characters, nothing's more fun than tracking multiple times to a really generic waterway. I love Edward's tale. And really all I'm hoping for is that the damage gets stacked onto guards and Harley, so Edward can keep up his periodic weak healing, while Guard B gets enough time to defend before getting attacked usually, and with his better armor, he's nearly invincible, so my odds of wiping in this dungeon are incredibly slim. Especially because you probably noticed the enemies are incredibly low ranking here. Much more so than they were when Theodore came through here. Or when Porom came through here, for that matter, even though in Porom's tale you were doing it in a flashback many years in the past. The game doesn't try to justify why this is, but given that Edward's level 8, I'm just happy it does it this way. So far, things have gone pretty well, though. Even though we're going through this dungeon backward, it still has a general enemy layout like it went the other way. So that first room we were in actually was the most dangerous, because it had a chance of having the incredibly powerful Gigascape. It didn't end up having any, but if we run into those, they very easily could kill a character. Gigascaters were actually real threats with real characters, so for Team Edward, they're flat terrifying. Otherwise, the slashers there are the biggest threats, and we're going to have to face a lot of those, and there's really not a whole lot we can do about it, other than keep healing and keep hoping. And that 1,000 gil is going to be important to buying Tent Slayer. We're going to lose a lot of it running from battles, but we'll still have a couple hundred left by the time we get out of here. Because again, these are really low-ranking enemies, so we don't lose that much money. On the other hand, we did just lose Guard C. So long, Guard C, we hardly knew you. The real question is, are we going to lose Guard A next, or are we going to lose Harley? Harley's been really lucky with not being targeted so far. But Harley is really bad. So she can go down at any time. We could even lose Edward next. That'd be pretty terrible. The only character I'm pretty sure is going to live is Guard B. Which is really good because I would feel really foolish to wipe in this easy dungeon. And I'm having suddenly terrible luck with what I need to stay alive. Oh, there goes Edward. Well, Guards A and B, counting on you. As you can tell, even though I just lost 3 characters, I'm totally unconcerned. This tale is a total joke. Oh, a Revenant. That's actually a pretty powerful enemy. There goes Guard C. Now, I don't actually want to wipe here, so I'm just going to drop those 2 potions on Guard A. which I'm very thankful I did, because Garde would not have survived this battle if I didn't do that. And here we go, everyone gets a full heal. That was really unlucky. Almost all the time you can make it through there without using any items. But, you know, Team Edward really sucks. Things happen. Things could happen even worse if I run into Gigastators. Now this room is well known for interesting conversations and character development on other tales or even in the original game. But here we've established that Harley was tired. Now she's less tired. Let's go. I don't know how she was tired. She was just lying down dead for a fair chunk of that trip. And I'm going around religiously picking up all these items, even though it should be pretty obvious I never intend to use any of them with Edward, because all your inventories in every tale transfer into the end game. And it's strictly an advantage to have this stuff at the end of the game, even though obviously a lot of it will be marginal. It's not that difficult to get. Edward's tale, as I've said many times, is a total joke. It's a trivial matter to pick up all the treasure. And there's a bunch of treasure off to the right there, but I'm going to be able to get it later much faster, so let's just hold off on that. And if you're actually bothering to collect bronze tails, that's the guy you can talk to eventually get that gold tail. Now, he's not really going to be a factor for me, but if you want some sort of goal that feels meaningful to strive for in Edward's tale, he should probably be the center point of your thinking. And here we are in Kaipo, and we've lost Harley. Again. And I guess she has desert fever. So, we have to go to the Antlion Den, which is by Mount Hob, which is by the meteor crash site. Which I'm sure everyone can recall is in the opposite direction. Wonderful! So let's play our harp and be sad by our long-dead fiance's grave. Get visited by her, again, very quiet ghost. Edward just doesn't quite get the message. So he needs someone to tell him just what a spoony bard he's being. Who better to do that than our old friend Tella? As Edward informs a dead man that he is in fact more alive, Tella basically tells Edward to stop being a wimp, stop being emo, and go out and live a good life. The bad news is the way Edward interprets this advice is that he should go and do several dungeons by himself. That's going to be a little scary, but that's why I bought all those healing items. So our L and R buttons and our healing items are going to get a good workout as we have to charge right back through the Kypho waterways, minus all the other meat shields. This is also why I gave all that defensive equipment to Edward. Not only did it give the greatest relative increase to him, but he's the only one who really matters here. And that potion is still the only item you can actually get here. Yeah, let's just spend it all on tents. And I'll buy a single potion because I'm going to lose this money anyway. Now I'm going to chance it progressing just a bit under waxing moon, even though full moon would be better. Because for story reasons, it has to be full moon when you enter the Antlions Den in order for you to get the Sand Pearl. So while there's no real risk of me running out of time, I don't want to push my luck. So I'm just going to progress here, lose a fair chunk of Edward's health. Because, you know, Edward kind of sucks like that. And then throw the tent at the first save point. Wow, those revenants hit hard. And you might also be tempted to use Edward's Hide command under the logic that you might as well minimize the damage you're taking. Bad thinking. If your only surviving character is a hiding Edward, you're not allowed to run, and automatically on your next turn you'll unhide. It's basically a total suicide tactic to use hide, so just don't do it. I was being silly. I forgot that I bought those tents late, so they'd be at the bottom of my inventory. This is at least a much quicker trip on the way back out, since I already did all the looting. And now that I'm in full moon, the threat this area represents is greatly diminished. And Edward's too big of a wimp to jump down the waterfalls, so we just have to take this side route. Amazing no one else could find it. I guess Edward might be a wimp, but at least he's smarter than the other characters. As the ghouls continue to impress us with their incredible accuracy. Oh, Gigaskater, that's really scary. Good thing I preempted it. But this has actually been a much better return trip than I had initially. Even though I've had Edward alone, I've had to heal the same amount, actually, because I had to drop those potions on guard A last time. And now that I'm through the waterways, any vague threats I faced are basically gone. Here in the Antlion's Den, the enemies are incredibly low ranking. The treasure, however, can be kind of decent, so let's go loot it. And I just picked up a spider silk. If you were paying attention to me jumping through the menus at the start of the tale, you probably noticed I bought a ton of them. Which again, I have no intention of using, but Edward is one of the only 2 characters who's able to buy spider silks during his own tale. Spider silks are not for sale in endgame, and they're incredibly useful. So Edward is going to be a major contributor toward my endgame party's ability to throw spider silk at every boss. And that is an upgrade weapon, a weapon upgrade for Edward. I'm going to equip it even though it really doesn't make a huge difference. Because Edward is forced in one battle in the endgame sequence, which, in all likelihood, at level 8, he's not going to make any real contribution to, but I'm going to give the poor guy at least a chance. Nothing over there of merit. In fact, we're actually done looting. But for all this random junk we picked up, the game did not deign give us an emergency exit, so we'll predictably have to back. I swear, I've gotten that so many times on Bard Song in this one. That's pretty crazy. Hooray! The supposedly peaceful Antlions actually are peaceful this time. That's good because I'm not convinced Edward could win that fight by himself. You'll also probably notice the Bard songs are healing a lot more now that Edward's alone. They actually divide their healing between the whole party. You have the option of single targeting, but since single targeting doesn't improve the effectiveness of Haste March or Guardian's Ballad, it's basically always a bad idea. Just a little bit of trivia there. And my favorite Bard song, the No Effect one. And back through the Kypho waterways again. Edward's tale. Good tale. Oh, but wait, we get an act of mercy. These guys are just here to mug us. They can tell Edward's rich and he's a wimp. But he has something shiny. So let's rob him. Makes sense to me. And Edward uses tide to hide at the bottom of the waterfall. You know, Edward, why couldn't you do this on the other trip we'll be doing? It would have saved us a lot of time. So now that we're here, we can pick up all these items we skipped before. Again, none of which are terribly important on a strategic level, but they're nice to have. And I am going to be conservative with the healing because I'm very close to the end of the tail, and it would be a real heartbreaker to die at this point. I should be fine at 214 though. I'd have to get really unlucky. All these encounters with strong enemy types are really not proving very helpful. This is an easy group, but I guess the water wave just wanted to give me one last middle finger before I was finally done with them for good. And you probably think, now that we're back at the Sand Pearl, we're finally done running around doing nothing of merit. No, that's not true. Now we have to address the actual storyline significance of it. So let's get our whole party back. We still won't be doing any fighting, but let's get them back anyway. And let's go to Baron. After we get over falling down or whatever happened then. Apparently, it's the duty of a secretary to watch her boss while he sleeps. That's wonderful to know. I really do wonder what kind of resume she sent in to get a job as a Donsian secretary. Because, you know, there's some guys who would really enjoy having a secretary who looks at things that way. I think most of us would just be creeped out, though. Now, Harley may be a worthless character, and may have very strange views on the proper role of a secretary, but she is going to drop that she is at the very least not actually stupid. As she drops that she knows about Golbez, which apparently is not public knowledge. And further, that she knows that magic and airships both were gifts to the people of Blue Planet by the Lunarians, which wasn't spelled out all that clearly in Final Fantasy IV, but is actually part of the world's lore. Specifically, the Lunarian who brought him to the Blue Planet was Kluya, who is the father of Golbez and Cecil, and is the spirit you see in Mount Ordeals. Also sometimes referred to as the dragon, though it has a bit of a double meaning because the continent on which the city lies is shaped like a dragon. Now here we meet up with Yang. So we hope we're going to have someone who can actually fight on our side when we go to deal with Cecil. But unfortunately, as you may recall, Yang's sailboat has engine troubles. Of course, we know it's not that his sailboat has engine troubles. It actually is that his sailboat ran out of fuel. Oh, this game and its plot. They can be wonderful things. But here we are in Baron, with Team Edward. Before we go into Castle, let's loot the town. And I really hope we run into very few encounters here, because these guys are actually pretty strong for lowly Team Edward. But we're almost done, so the odds of us getting wiped are very slim. Edward gets a lot worse treasure than everyone else here, but treasure is treasure, so I still want it anyway. Another one of the very strange sunbathers in Baron. And I missed going back here in some of the other tales, for which I apologize. There's always some loot back here. And it's actually faster to just leave town that way. Even though we're actually done looting town, let's go visit Sid's daughter. She's always fun. Well, she's usually fun. I guess Team Edward makes everything more boring than it is with everyone else. So let's go talk to Cecil. I'm sure Edward, the powerful leader, will be able to convince him to do things reasonably. Now, unfortunately, the guards do a good job of protecting all the treasure in Paris, so we don't really have anywhere to go but straight to the throne room. Now, this is a wonderfully productive conversation in which we establish that Cecil has really nothing useful to say to Edward. So it does take a wonderfully patronizing attitude toward Edward. To be fair, if I were Cecil, I probably would too. Now that Cecil's put us in our place, we say we're going to leave. Though Edward uses his keen mind to keep up with his other weakness to notice that Rosa's not here. And also to press about the question of where is Theodore? Cecil hand waves them both, and then decides to give us a little present. And we're going to give him a little present, too. Edward doesn't seem so happy about the exchange of gifts, but let's get out of here and see how it works out. And that's it. We just have to make it to the boat, and we're done with the gameplay. Though this last cutscene actually contains more stuff relevant to the story than the entire rest of the tale. Edward realizes that Cecil is not right in any way at all. And then informs Harley that the gift he gave Cecil was actually a listening device. So now we're spying on Cecil, talking to some mysterious girl of sorts. As they discuss how easy it would be to seize Domcian and take our fire crystal. Turns out Cecil's plan was to give us a present, which is actually an item that's going to unleash a bunch of fire monsters as soon as it's over. You probably remember the end of the main quest. We worked this to our advantage to kill a bunch of zombie cards. Edward doesn't protect the fire crystal anyway because Kain's there, and Edward's ability to win a battle with Kain is about as high as Cecil's ability was at the start of the game to win a battle with Bahamut. But here we see Leviathan. We find out what ultimately happened to Yang. We decide we're not going to go in the Whirlpool, and it's just kind of implied we make it back to Domcian safely. That's it for Edward's tale. I'm sorry that I just wasted 53 minutes of your time, but I hope you guys found some enjoyment out of a sad day in the life of Edward anyway. I'll be back with the challenge dungeon, which is honestly even stupider than the tale itself, but as an act of mercy, it's really, really quick. And then we'll be on to Lunarians, which is a big change of pace, because instead of being the boringest and dumbest tale like this one, it's actually a really cool. So I'll see you guys next time with the very sad challenge dungeon, and then we'll be back with Lunarians, which is what I've been looking forward to. See you then!